Fire has always been a part of the Australian landscape. The Australian Aborigines, they used to use fire for hunting. You could use it to chase animals into areas where they could be more easily speared. And also after a fire you get this little burst of fertility, so you get all this nice green stuff coming up that animals like to eat. So they would congregate in areas where there had been a fire, so that would make them easier to spear. And it's been called fire stick farming, what the Aborigines did. And it's become such a part of the Australian landscape that it's completely changed the nature of the flora and fauna in Australia. And such that with repeated burning, those things that were less fire tolerant retreated to areas where there was less fire, and those things that were fire tolerant or fire encouraging tended to dominate most of Australia's landscape. And now that the whites are here, we have taken on that, and we use fire as a preventative measure. You light fires during the cooler, wetter months, when the fires will be much cooler and much easier to control. And that way there won't be all the fuel around when it's hotter and drier. And the unfortunate thing about that is that you've got all this beautiful mulch lying on the ground that's fertilising the soil, and then you get a fire come through and it just burns all that off, and you get a burst of nutrients, but the trouble is that in a couple of years that all gets leached away. So in the long term, fire degrades the soil and it decreases your biodiversity. So on this property, when I first moved in here, it was dominated by 3 species of eucalypts, and 90% of the trees on the property were just those 3 species of eucalypts. There was a few wattles and not much else. And I thought I'd try and do something about that. So what I did was, first thing I did was I put a fire break around the property. I joined the local fire brigade, volunteer fire brigade, so I could learn more about fires and how to fight them and stuff. And I bought some firefighting gear. If you walk around the property, and pretty well anywhere in Australia, you'll see charcoal at the base of trees pretty well everywhere. So it's not a case of if you're going to get a fire, it's a case of when. And very often these days it's people are lighting fires to try and stop fires, and that gets out of control, and what starts off as a controlled burn turns into a wildfire. It's a little bit like snakes, in that the statistics are that the majority of people that get bitten by snakes are actually trying to kill them at the time. So if you don't try and kill the snakes, you're much less likely to be bitten by one. And it's the same with fire. You're afraid of fire, lighting fires to try and mitigate fire risk, and in the process you can create more fires of what you're creating, more of what you're afraid of. So anyway, since I have been on the property, making sure no fire has come, it has been threatened a couple of times. There was a fire on a neighbouring property that we stopped at just about 50 metres from my fence line, and so there's been like 3 fires on neighbours' properties in the 6 years that I've been here, and so it is a very real danger around here. But I've managed to keep fire off the property. And when you walk around the property, you can see little native plants coming up that aren't one of those 3 major species. There's currajongs coming up, there's alphitonias coming up, there's lots of other Australian natives that I haven't yet learnt to recognise. But so if I was to do nothing else but keep fire off the property, I would be doing quite a bit towards regenerating this to what it would have been before all the fires came through.